incredible schus today to learn Daf Samichay in Meseches Yevamos. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. So first, I want to once again thank Maishi and Jeremy for enabling and allowing me to be able to give Daf even when I'm not there with you physically. Just gone for the day, and I look forward to being back in person later on this afternoon. I'm going to come back with you tomorrow morning, but it's a great schus to be able to continue our limud together. So begin by thanking our sponsor, our Talmud Torah sponsors, for the month of Iyar, to thank Yonah and Shushi Ehrenfeld for dedicating all of the Shiurim and Drashos this month in memory of their grandfather Yosef and Shmuel Aaron, and Benjamin and Elise Wald and Netanya Eretz Yisrael for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drashos this month in memory of Moshe Chaim ben Tzvi Hirsch. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. Sorry. Okay. And I will say with that, let us begin. So like I said, today's daf is Samichay. We are picking up on Samich Daled Amud Beis 64b. And we left off Amar Rabba, Hashtod da Amrit. So it is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21 lines up from the bottom. So we'll say, so remember again, we left off in the middle of a fascinating machlokes. And the machlokes was, when do we establish chazaka? Is chazaka established after 2 occurrences or after 3 occurrences? And that was the fundamental shayla. So remember again, so we had a machlokes, Rebbe and Reb Shimon Gamliel, and there was a machlokes then who said what. In the original iteration, we had Rebbe saying that chazaka is established after 2, and Reb Shimon Gamliel saying chazaka is established after 3. Now remember again, where did this come up? Why are we in this topic? Because the Mishnah said that if a woman was married to a man for 10 years and she didn't have children, so he's obligated to divorce her or marry another woman and in order to have a family, but she's permitted to marry someone else. So the Gemara made a diuk, she's permitted to marry someone else if this happens a second time. In other words, I should say, if it happens with the first husband, she's permitted to marry the second, but the inference was that if this would happen with 2 husbands, she would not be permitted to marry a third, which seems to indicate to us that chazaka is established after 2 occurrences. So the Gemara says, whose opinion is this? The Gemara suggested it's Rebbe, because what did Rebbe say? If a couple had a son, and they gave their first son a bris milah, and he died machmas milah, died because of the milah, and then a second son, he died because of the milah, so Rebbe says, ultimately, the third son, they should not give a bris milah to. Rav Shimon Gamliel said, the third son they should, the 4th son they shouldn't. So that was the Gemara was suggesting that our Mishnah reflects the view of Rebbe, that chazaka is established after 2 times. But then the Gemara said, okay, we have different attributions, Rebbe, Rav Shimon Gamliel. So we'll say, now let's go back to Amar Rava. So Rava said, Hashtad da Amrit achayos mechaskos. Now that we established that chazaka could be established through sisters, which remember again was an interesting idea. This was the case of sisters, all who had sons who died machmas milah, who died as a result of bris milah. So we established that there's a chazaka in the family, that the boys in the family die because of bris milah. So chazaka is established through sisters. So the Gemara says, Lo yisa adam isha mishpachas nichbin, v'lo mishpachas mitzoraim. A person shouldn't marry a woman from a family of, nichbin is literally epileptics, people of epilepsy, or people of tzaras, right? Because again, now essentially what we're saying is that you could establish a chazaka through a family. So therefore, if there's a family that has a chazaka of a certain disease, one should try to avoid marrying such a family. But again, that's assuming that chazaka is established 3 times. So we'll say here you see chazaka is established 3 times. My habi Allah. So we'll say, so bottom line, so what happened? In other words, so what's the resolution? In other words, here's what we know. We know there's a machlokes about when chazaka is established, 2 times versus 3 times. We know that this machlokes is Rebbe or Shimon Gamliel. What we don't know is who says what. That's what we're missing here. So Kiyos Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amar Uvda Hava Kamed Rabbi Yochanan B'Knish Tedema B'Yom Kippur Shchalios B'Shabbos. Listen to this. So the Gemara says, so Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef came along. He said there was an episode that happened with Rabbi Yochanan in a shul in Ma'on, in Eretz Yisrael, in Ma'on on Yom Kippur. Okay, Shechalios b'Shabbos. So this was Yom Kippur that fell out on Shabbos. So the truth is, the geography of the episode is not as important. The fact that it was in Eretz Yisrael and Ma'on. What's important for us is the recognition that it is Shabbos Yom Kippur. That was the important part to remember. Shabbos Yom Kippur, and what happened? So Umala Rishona Umes. Shnia umeis, ubas umeis, umeis, shlishis ba'at lefanam. So here was the situation. The situation was of a mishpacha who was going ahead and giving bris milah to their sons on Yom Kippur that fell out on Shabbos. The first child died, machmas milah. The second child died, machmas milah. Now the parents come to go ahead and give a bris to the third son. So what happens? Rabbi Yochanan said, L'chi umoli. Rabbi Yochanan said, go, you could go ahead and give a bris milah to the third son. And I will say, now what's happening over here is, so remember you have two boys who died machmas milah. They now want to be mal the third son on Shabbos Yom Kippur. Now remember again, if you have a bris milah that falls out on the 8th day, that's Shabbos Yom Kippur, of course you're permitted to do it on Shabbos Yom Kippur. Here the issue is, two sons had just passed away. They want to do a bris milah on the third son. Rabbi Yochanan says, do the bris. Amrli Abaye. Abaye says, Chazi, de kasharis isura v'sakanta. Abaye says, Rabbi Yochanan, I just want to tell you, you made two mistakes. You, number one, permitted an isser, in other words, because you allowed an illegal bris milah on Shabbos Yom Kippur. The reason Abaye was saying that it's illegal was because, again, this child should not have had a milah after having two brothers who died, machmas milah. And number three, sakana. You allowed something that was sakana, that ultimately, again, was dangerous because halacha l'maisa, two previous siblings had passed away because of milah. Samach ale Abaye, the azal naspa l'choma barta di isi breid Rabbi Yitzchak, breid Rabbi Yehuda. So I will say, now Abaye himself relied on this, right? And Abaye also went ahead and assumed that chazaka is only established after 3 times. So what did Abaye do? Abaye went and he married a woman by the name of Choma. That was her name, Choma. And Choma was the daughter of Isi, the daughter of Isi, very good. So what happened? Now, what's Choma's story? Dinas barachba de Pumpadisa v'shachiv. Choma was originally married to a man by the name of Rachba of Pumpadisa. He died. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yitzchak brei de Rabba bar Yochanan v'shachiv. Ultimately, and then she married Rabbi Yitzchak brei de Rabba, and he died. Now we'll see, we're going to see the notion of a woman who marries multiple husbands and all of her husbands die. Now, again, we're going to see die not because of natural causes, or die not because of old age, or die not because of freak accidents, but again, die, and we're concerned that maybe there's something with her. So what happened? So Abaye married this woman Choma. She was previously married twice, and both of her husbands passed away. V'naspa, Abaye married her, v'shachiv, and he died. Which I was saying seems to lend credence to the approach that says that chazaka is established after 2 occurrences. Amar Rava says, Umi iga da avid uvda benafshe ki hai v'ha'iu da amar abin l'samcha. So the Gemara says, so Rava says, is there anyone like Abaye who goes ahead and not only espouses a position, but ultimately goes ahead and actually relies on it? To which the Gemara says, "Iuda Amar Abin de Samcha Yitzchak Sumka Lav Bar Samcha." Yet Rabbi said we learned that Abaye himself said Avin is an opinion that you could rely on. Yitzchak Sumka is an opinion that you can't rely on. Yitzchak Sumka is Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef. So why is that? Avin Yeshno Bechazar. This is incredible. Why can you rely on the opinion of Avin? Because also listen to this. Avin chazard his learning. He chazard his learning. So when someone goes in and chazars their learning, then ultimately that's an opinion you could rely on. Yitzchak Sumka Eina Bechazara. Yitzchak Sumka, Yitzchak Bar Yosef, he doesn't go ahead and chazar his learning. We'll say absolutely incredible. Look at Rashi. Abin de Samcha, Mashamar Abin, Mashamar Abin, Mishum Rabbi Yochanan Yesh L'Smoch, Yeshna Bechazara. Chozer al Talmudo. Let's say, it's a little bit strange and it's a little bit overwhelming to kind of see a Gemara like this, especially for a Daf Yomi Chevra, where I think probably one of our greatest challenges. Okay, it's not difficult to get through the Daf. It's not even difficult to retain things in the Daf. The difficult part in the Daf is Chazara on the Daf. And yet we see that Abaye is coming along, Gemara is coming along and saying that ultimately Abin could be relied upon because he chazard. But at the end of the day, that others can't be relied upon because they didn't chazar their learning. Incredible. So the Gemara says, "Va'od emar de palag le'inyan mila b'nei suim mipligi." I will say furthermore again. So remember, let's go back. Let's go back to what we were discussing. So remember, we have a machlokes, a general machlokes, and we're going to see it's a shas machlokes about how we establish chazaka. Is chazaka established after 2 occurrences? Is chazaka established after 3 occurrences? That is an ongoing machlokes. That we know. So the Gemara says, but one second, let's take a step back. The machlokes of Rebbe and Reb Shimon Gamliel that we started this sugya with is machlokes by Mila. It's machlokes by Mila. A family has sons who have died as a result of bris milah. They bled out for bris milah. So the question is, at what point in time do we establish that this family has a chazaka, that the boys die machmas milah as a result of bris milah, which would then exempt future sons from bris? When is that chazaka established? So we've got Rebbe saying 2 times establishes chazaka, therefore 3rd son doesn't do bris milah. Reb Shimon Gamliel 3 times establishes chazaka, therefore 4th son doesn't do chazaka. We're now taking this, and we're kind of reading this back into our Mishnah, to which the Gemara says, how do you know? Maybe this concept of chazaka only applies by milah, doesn't apply by marriage, to which the Gemara says, or I should say, maybe the argument regarding chazaka only applies by milah, doesn't apply by marriage. B'nisuin mipligi. How do you know to argue by marriage? To which the Gemara says, in vatanya nises l'rishon umeis l'sheni umeis. If a woman married, I will say this is what I was mentioning before, the concept of a katlanis, the concept of a concern, almost I guess what they would call today like a black widow. A woman who's been married multiple times and has husbands who died multiple times. Well, husbands didn't die, husbands died once, but multiple husbands who died. So the Gemara says, listen to this. If a woman married her first husband and the husband died, she marries a second husband and the husband dies. Rebbe says she shouldn't get married a third time. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "L'shlishi tinase, l'revi'i lo tinase." No, she can get married a 3rd time. She can't get married a 4th time. So if 3 husbands die, she can still marry up to a 4th time. If 3 husbands die, she cannot marry a 4th time. But up to that, she's permitted to marry. So what do you see? The same machlokes Rabbi Shimon Gamliel about chazaka that we saw by milah applies by marriage as well. So bishlam agabe mila ika mishpacha derafi dama v'ika mishpacha dekamit dama. So I understand the discussion by bris milah, because they're all saying by bris milah. Again, we know today that when you have a situation of boys who are dying machmas milah, what is that representative of? That's representative of a condition of hemophilia. So I understand that you could establish a chazak. You look at a family and you have 2, according to Rebbe, 2 sons who died machmas milah. According to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, 3 sons who died machmas milah. We could establish a chazaka. However, says the Gemara al nisuin my taima. But if a woman is married, right? She marries husband number 1, he dies. She married husband number 2, she dies. According to Rabbi now, she can't marry husband number 3, right? According to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, husband 1 dies, 2 dies, 3 dies. She can't marry 4. What's the pshat? Like, what is it that we're concerned about? I will say we're concerned that maybe there's something about this woman. Maybe it's the act of relations with her. Maybe it's something else that's causing these men to die. There's a concern that if their deaths are not attributable to something else, what we look at least is that we can't say definitively, but is the possibility that maybe it's the act of relations with her, maybe there's something else in their intimate lives that ultimately again is causing the premature death. But Ravashi says no, mazel gorim. Ravashi says maybe it's not an issue of intimacy with her, maybe it's her mazel. Maybe it's her mazel that ultimately again is causing her husbands to die. So I will say, what's the nafkamina between whether or not it's intimacy with her or her mazel? Ika benau the ir somes. So we'll say the nafkamina would be where the husbands are dying during erisin. So if it's during erisin, there's no intimacy, but there is mazel. There is mazel. Inami dinafal mi diklo mes. What's the other possibility? It's if he fell off a palm tree and died. So if he fell off a palm tree, right? If you have 3 husbands who fell off palm trees and died, I mean that looks a little suspicious in and of itself, right? But lamaisa, it's certainly not a din in intimacy, right? But could be a din in her mazel. So we'll say I will point out that this idea of this, or this concept of a katlanis, which is the black widow, the woman who's marries multiple times, and each of the husbands pass away, is a separate sugya. We'll see in the Maseches Ksuvis how this is dealt with, because first of all, it does happen. It does happen that a woman is married multiple times and has multiple husbands who pass away. And again, how do we deal halachically with such a situation like that? We'll deal with that independently. Let's get back to our sugya. So the Gemara says, Amar li Rav Yosef Beit Rav Rava. By my name Rav Yosef, halacha karebi. Va'amar li, ein halacha Reb Shimon Gamliel. Va'amar li, Va'amar li, in. So the Gemara, listen to this. It says, so Rav Yosef Beit Rava said to Rava. By me, he asked from him, Rav Yosef, halacha karebi va'amar li in. He asked, is the halacha like Rebbe? And he responded, yes. Halacha Reb Shimon Gamliel. Then he asked, halacha Reb Shimon Gamliel va'amar li in. So let's see what's happening over here. So you have over here that they asked him, Rav Yosef, does the halacha follow Rebbe, that chazaka is established after 2 times? And Rav Yosef said yes. And then they asked him, does the halacha follow Rav Shimon that chazaka is established after 3 times? And he said yes. So what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, achuche achechbi. So I will say, so ultimately, again, so Rava thought that Rav Yosef was making fun of him, right? He's saying yes each time. You must be mocking me. So the Gemara says, Amar le lo sasmi hai upashet lach. So I will say, at the end of the day, the truth is, the halacha really follows both. This is a fundamental machlokes in Shas. Is chazaka established after 3 times? Is chazaka established after 2 times? This is a fundamental machlokes. And I will say, here's what's fascinating. What's fascinating is the halacha follows both of them. And sometimes chazaka is established after 2 times, and sometimes chazaka is established after 3 times. So I will say, watch this. This is a great sugya. Now we're going to go through a list of where sometimes chazaka is established after 2 occurrences, and sometimes it's established after 3. Here we go. Nisuin umalkios karebi. So in case of marriage and malchus, we'll discuss what this means. We paskin like Rebbe, namely that chazaka is established after 2 occurrences. Vestos, so menstrual cycles. Shor hamuat, an ox, or an ox that is worn for goring, right? Namely that we establish chazaka after 3 occurrences. Let's go through these lists. Says the Gemara, Nisuin hada amr. So we'll say Nisuin is what we said in the Mishnah. So remember again, in the Mishnah, what we're saying is that halacha l'maisa, if a woman was married to a man and was childless for 10 years, so halacha l'maisa, they divorce, right? And she's permitted to marry someone else. And when she marries another man, she has another 10-year clock that starts, another 10-year clock. But halacha l'maisa, if she goes ahead and at the end of the second marriage, now 10 years into second marriage, she still doesn't have children, so then she has a chazaka that she is barren, that she is infertile, and therefore again, when it comes to her 3rd marriage, we would not let her marry someone who needs to have children. She can marry someone, but she should marry someone who already has a family, already fulfilled the mitzvah perivarivya. Malchias, we'll say, what's the case of Malchias? So watch this. Disnan, Mishalak of Ashana, based in Konsin also the Kipa, Uma'achilin also Sa'or Machat de Kresun of Kas. So this is an interesting case. This is a case of a guy who has violated a chi of kares. And I will say, if you think about Nadera that has a chi of kares, right? So let's say you have an individual who go eating on Yom Kippur. Eating on Yom Kippur is a chi of kares. Let's say there's a guy who ate on Yom Kippur twice. Now we warn him. We'll say, now the halacha is, if you violate a kares infraction, you get malchus. You get lashes. What happens if you have a guy who repeatedly violates kares infractions? We warn him, there's Eidim, there's Hasra, but he's still not listening. So what do we do? Mishalak of Ashana. If he ate on Yom Kippur and then he did it again, based in Konsin also the Kippah, see Rabbi said there's no Misa Midei Shama, there's no Misa Midei Adam, there's no right court-imposed death penalty in this case. But what do we do for this person? We go ahead and we put him in a cell, we feed him barley, and what happens? His stomach swells, and as a result of that, ultimately he dies. So kind of, we kill him in a more passive way. Okay, and that's established after twice. Next, vestos to Rabbanon, I will say avesas, right? So avesas means a cycle, in this case a menstrual cycle. Vestos, are established after 3 occurrences. This nan, because we learned Eina Isha Kovas Veses, top of Samachay, Kovas Lo Veses, Ad Shetikabena Shalosh Panim. I will say, it's incredible. How is a Veses? Right? How is a Veses? How is a menstrual cycle established? After 3 occurrences. So after only comes a nida in the same type of cycle 3 times, she has what's called a veses kavua. Again, we're not going to get into hilchos nida now in terms of what that means. But Allah Lamaisa, now she is considered to have a regular cycle. Similarly, again, I will say, how do you undo a veses kavua? Right? How do you undo a regular cycle? She becomes a nida not on that appointed time 3 times. So here's an example. So just pointing out, it's fascinating. So in halacha, it's one of these fascinating things. How many times does it take to create a chazaka? And the answer is sometimes 2, sometimes 3. Let's go finish the list. V'shara muad, and shara muad. Also remember again, shara muad is an animal that has now become a habitual gorer. I don't know if gorer is the right word, but it is gores habitually. So the Gemara says, this nan eina shar nasa muad ache idu bo shalosh pamim. A shar becomes a shar muad after it has gored 3 times. So we'll say, so this is the end of the sugya, and it's really incredible. So halacha lemaisa, how many times does it take to establish chazaka? The answer is, Rabbi's right, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is right. Sometimes it's 2 times, sometimes it's 3 times. Again, the list of 2 times seems to be right now for nisuin, marriage purposes, and for malchus, for kares purposes, right? And 3 times vesas for hilchos nida and shor hamuad. Obviously, there are many other occurrences of chazaka as well, but this is the fundamental machlokes, and interestingly enough, they are both correct. Beautiful. Says the Gemara. So here we go. Here we go. A woman is married to a man. Rachel is married to Ruvain, and they're married for 10 years. They don't have children. Okay, so then they divorce. So what happens? And now what happens? Rachel marries Shimon, not a brother. Right? Rachel marries Shimon, and now they're married for 10 years. No children. So now they get divorced. She gets divorced from Shimon. Rachel could get remarried. But who should Rachel get remarried to? To someone who already has a family. That's what should happen. She should get married to someone who already has a family. Since again, we just established, we passing like Rebbe, that in this situation, chazaka is established after 2 times, and therefore halacha lemaisa, she should marry someone who already has a family. Good. So the Gemara says, Nises l'misha ein labanim. What happens if Rachel didn't listen, and now Rachel marries Levi, and Levi is a young guy who hasn't yet fulfilled the mitzvah of Perivya, so he needs to have kids. What's the halacha? Teitzei below ksuva. In that case, Levi should divorce Rachel, and ultimately, again, Rachel gets divorced without a ksuva. Now, I will say, now this is very interesting. Why doesn't Rachel get a ksuva? So I will say, just quickly, if you take a look at Tosas, Teitzei below ksuva, you see it's a little bit of a long, well, it's not such a long Tosas. Tosas is, so I will say, if you look in that Tosas, 2, 4, 6, 7 lines in the wide lines of Tosas, 3 lines in the middle of the line, lekach mira lari de la alter teitzei shelo b'ksuva v'lo mishum knas. So first of all, Levi, now the 3rd husband, is obligated to divorce her immediately, and she doesn't get a ksuva. But why doesn't she get a ksuva? Tosa says it's not because of a knas, it's not because of a penalty. So why is it? And I will say go 2 more lines down into the Tosas. In the wide lines of Tosas, it's 2, 4, 6 lines in. Elamira lari de bishalo hikir ba'iri v'teitzei shelo b'ksuvasa mishum dahavi mekach tos. So we'll say this is incredible. So Tosa says, what's the case? The case over here is she married Ruvain for 10 years. They don't have kids. For 10 years, okay, so they get divorced. She marries Shimon. 10 years, they don't have kids. She gets divorced. Now remember, the halacha is now she has a chazaka, because we pass like Rabbi in this case, she has a chazaka that unfortunately she can't have children. Could she remarry? Yes, she could absolutely remarry, but she should marry someone who's already fulfilled the mitzvah of Pirya Verivya. Fine. So now she marries Levi. So what does the Gemara say? And Levi has to have kids. Levi's a young guy. He hasn't fulfilled the mitzvah of Pirya Verivya. Levi should divorce her. No ksuva. Why no ksuva? Tos says, it's a case. It's a case where she didn't disclose. Levi married her, and he was unaware of the fact that she had been married previously 2 marriages. I mean, the fact that Levi didn't realize that she's got 20 years of marital history, somebody's clearly not checking out shidduch references. on behalf of Levi, that's for sure. But Lamaisa, he didn't know. He didn't know. So Tosa says when the Gemara says Teitzei below Ksuva, why on both sides? This is what's called in halacha and mekach tos. We'll say there's so much to say about this, about when a person marries someone, and then only after the marriage do they discover information that had they known that information on the front end, they would not have married this person. So what does that do to the marriage? So I will say, again, we can't get into it now, but on a most basic level, Tosas is saying is that when Levi discovers that Rachel has been married twice before and 20 years of marital history, and halacha l'maisa, again, she was unable to conceive, that's a mekach tos. That's a mekach tos, and therefore teitzei below ksuva is not a knas, it's not a penalty, but rather it's a reflective of this newfound information. Had I known this before, I would not have married this woman. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, the marriage is effectively dissolved. Good. Iboilo. Let's go weiter. Iboilo. Nises l'shlishi v'lo hayu labanim. So I'll say, now watch this. Now let's say Rachel marries a third husband. Rachel marries a third husband, right? Now remember, she's not supposed to marry a guy who doesn't have children. Well, let's say she did, and now she married Levi, and they're married for 10 years. Suppose say, so now it's clear that halacha l'maisa, right? It's clear that halacha l'maisa, she's incapable of having children. So v'lo labanim ma'u diletavua hanach kamoi. So I say, now watch this. Now remember, when Reuven divorces her and Shimon divorces her, they have to pay a ksuba. Why do they have to pay a ksuba? Because the truth is, it's not clear whose issue the fertility is, right? It could be the husband, it could be the wife. Now, after Rachel's been married a third time, so now again, now 3 marriages, unable to conceive, it's pretty clear that we've established, according to everyone, Rebbe and Gamliel, that the issue is her. So can the first 2 husbands now go back and sue to reclaim their ksuba? Right? Because they paid her a ksuba. Why did they pay her a ksuba? Because at the time of the divorce, it wasn't clear. Is it you? Is it me? Now it's clear that it's her. Can they go back and reclaim ksuba? What a shaila. What a shaila. Mi matzu amrile. Can husbands 1 and 2, can Reuven and Shimon go back and say to Rachel, Igloi milsa da'atu de garamt. It's clear now that it's you. It's clear now that it's you. It's not me, it's you. Oh, Dilma. Matzis amrit la hashtu de kachushe. Or could she say no? First of all, it's not clear. It's not clear. What was. It could very well be that it was you, Reuven, in first marriage, you, Reuven, in second marriage, and now it's me in number 3. It's possible. Or it's just possible that it's Levi. In other words, she could say, you have no definitive claim that Allah Lamaisa it was me. To which the Gemara says, so we'll say who's right. Mistabra matzis amris lahu hashtu de kachishi. And we'll say the Gemara says it's clear that Rachel is right. Rachel is right, and that she has the ability to say to Reuven and Shimon, no, it's just as feasible that it was you, Reuven, you, Shimon, and now maybe in this third marriage it's me. Literally, it means now I have become weakened. In other words, it's possible that I didn't have fertility issues before, and now I have fertility issues in this marriage. Good. So therefore, Abba say, Allah Lamaisa, they cannot go back and reclaim ksuba. Incredible. So let's go back there. See, Bailuhu, Nises l'Revi'i v'haya labanim. So say, now watch this. Now an interesting case. Let's say Rachel, right, marries Reuven, no kids. Marries Shimon, no kids. Marries Levi, no kids. Now remember, the halacha is Reuven had to pay ksuba, Shimon had to pay ksuba. Levi, let's go assuming to Tosas. Levi didn't know that she was married previously with no children, so that's the halacha. Teitzei below ksuba. Divorces her, no ksuba. Now, so we'll say, now watch this. Now Rachel marries Reuven, Shimon, right? Yehuda. She marries Yehuda, and Baruch Hashem, they have children. Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov. So listen to this. Mao ditetabe l'shlishi. Oh, so now what does she want to do? This is great. She wants to go back to Levi, and she's Levi. You owe me a ksuva, right? You divorced me without a ksuva, because again, we established you thought that it was me, the fertility issue was mine. Now it's clear, Baruch Hashem, I'm fertile, I had children with Yehuda, you owe me a ksuva. So can she go back to Levi and say, pay me my ksuva? So now watch this. Amrin Allah, we say to her, listen, shtikusech yafa medibureich. And we say to her, your silence is better than your speech. Now, never say that to anyone, right? But Lamaisa, the halacha says it. The halacha says it to her, right? Your silence is better than your speech. Why? The matzi amar la ana adaite dahachi lo grashticha. Oh, wow. Because Rabbi say, what are we concerned about? If she goes back to Levi and she goes back to Levi, I want my ksuva, right? Levi says, you know what, you're absolutely right. By the way, the get that I gave you is void as well. Because the truth is, I only divorced you because I thought you were barren. Now that I see that you're not barren, I would have never given you a get. Ay vavay. And if that happens, then what occurs? Then I will say, what could potentially be? Then it turns out that her marriage to Yehuda ultimately was illegal. The children are mamzerim, and we've got a whole host of problems. So therefore, the halacha says to Rachel, you know what? Let it be. Let it be. Better sometimes first a good mussar in life. Sometimes let it be. Just let it lie. You know what was, and let's move on. Even so, we'll say what's interesting is the Gemara seems to see Rachel would have a good taina, right? Rachel does have a good claim to be able to collect her ksuva. It sounds like she does have a solid claim, but Lamaisa, that claim to collect her ksuva could also potentially awaken Levi's claim to potentially void the get, and that of course we don't want. Maskif Papa. So Rav says, okay, that's fine, but ihi shaska. Anan mishaskinam. So one second, the Gemara says, okay, so now we're telling Rachel, don't try to claim your ksuva from Levi. That's fine. But Lamaisa, from our vantage point, don't we have a problem now? Because at the end of the day, doesn't this mean that Levi divorced the woman because he thought she was barren? It turns out that she's not barren. Doesn't that cast a pall upon the get? And don't we really now have a problem of Rachel being married to Yehuda and potential mamzerim? So Ana Mishaskim Nimsa get batal b'nei mamzerim. Ela Aminan, what do we say? Ela Aminan hashto hu dibrias. Rather, I will say no. So here's what's interesting: is the way we look, the way that halacha looks at fertility issues through the lens of halacha, is that we don't allow current circumstance to kind of shed light on past occurrences. So I will say, in the same way that when she gets divorced from Ruvain, Shimon, and now Levi, right? So we don't go ahead and say that anyone could recapture ksuva from her, right? Because we say, she could say that, look, maybe I was fertile all of that time, became infertile now. It's the same thing now. Halacha l'maisa, if she didn't have children with previous husbands, we write that off as infertility. The fact that now she had children with Yehuda, we assume panim chadashos ba'alakan. This is a new occurrence. This is Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov. I've been healed. Thank God she experienced the Yeshua, Refuah, incredible. But we assume that's what happened now, and we don't allow present circumstances to reflect back on previous marriages. Because if we do, the Gemara says, we see already, we could run into a whole host of issues. Beautiful. Let's go weiter. So hu Amar Mina Bihi Amra Mine. So we'll say, now watch this case. Look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Mina Ani Yodeh Shemachmasahu She'im Li Banim V'lo Etein Ksuva. So we'll say, now let's see the following situation. Ruvain and Rachel are married. They don't have children. Ruvain says, I know it's her problem. It's her issue. Vihi Amra Minei. And she says, I know it's his issue. It's his issue. So ultimately, again, the Gemara says, so we'll say, so by the way, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, last Rashi on the Daf, Mina, Yodeh Ani Shemach Masahu She'in Li Banim V'lo Etein Ksuvasa. Now the idea over here is that Reuben is married to Rachel. They don't have children. Reuben says, I know it's her, and therefore we're going to get divorced, and I'm not paying her ksuva. She says, I know it's him. Then I will say, here's what's interesting. She's able to say, I know it's him. Why? Her claim is like this, that when he ejaculates, it's not yorek kechetz. It doesn't come out, literally shoots like an arrow. It doesn't come out with force. The Gemara understands that any time that there's an ejaculation without force, that the zera, the semen, doesn't shoot out, so to speak, doesn't come out with a strong force. Yorek it's like an arrow, it won't impregnate. So she says, it's not my problem, it's your problem. Your zera is not yorek kechetz. So we'll say, so what's the halacha? So Amar Rabbi Ami, Dvarim Shebeino Lebeino Ne'emenes. This is actually fascinating. When it comes to matters of intimacy, the woman is believed over the man. She is believed over the man. Halacha l'maisa, she's believed over him. V'taimamai, what's the reason? He kaim lo biyorek kechetz, hu lo kaim le biyorek kechetz. Because this is fascinating and it's interesting. Because the Gemara says we assume that halacha l'maisa, she knows if the zera is yorek kechetz, and she's more cognizant of that than he is. than he is. I guess since the zera is coming into her body, she's more cognizant of that than he is. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Amar Ihi, Amar Ihu, Ezel Insub Isasav Ibduk Nafshai. So listen to this case. Reuben's married to Rachel. They don't have children. So now he wants to divorce her, but the only case he doesn't want to pay the ksuva. So we'll say, so first of all, we've established number one, a woman is believed in matters of intimacy, and therefore halacha l'maisa, if she says the problem is that your zera is not yorek echetz, doesn't shoot like an arrow, then halacha l'maisa, we believe her. Here's the second case. Reuben and Rachel married 10 years. He wants to get divorced. He doesn't want to pay the ksuva. So therefore, again, what happens? So he says, look, the problem's not me, the problem's you. He has, I'll prove it to you. Prove it to you. I'm going to marry another woman right now, and you're going to see she's going to become pregnant. And that'll show. We'll be able to see definitively. So Rabbi Ami, af bazu yotzev yitin ksuva. So Rabbi Ami says, if a husband's going to do that, he certainly should divorce his wife, and he's certainly obligated to pay the ksuva. Why? Shani Omer kalanose ishal ishto yotzev yitin ksuva. Because ultimately, again, Rabbi Ami says, Rabbi say, anytime a man marries another woman without the consent of his wife, a wife has a right to get a get, to receive a get, and ultimately automatically get her ksuba paid out. So Rabbi will say, very interesting, she did Rabbi Ami. As much as polygamy may be permitted, Rabbi Ami says you are not permitted to marry another wife without the consent of your already existing wife. So you want to show that you're fertile, you want to go marry another wife, and your wife doesn't consent to it, you're certainly obligated to pay her ksuba. Rava says, no say adam kama nashem al ishtavu des lemizanayi. So Rava says you can marry as many women as you want, even without the consent of your existing wives, as long as you have enough material support to provide for all of those households. Or we'll say Amud Beis. Hu Amar. So we'll say, so therefore again, so case number one is he's claiming it's her, he's claiming it's her, she's claiming it's him. She's believed when she has a time of that your zera is not yorek echetz. That's case number one. Case number two, he says, I want to divorce you. I'm not paying your ksuva because it's you who's infertile. It's a mekach tos. And he says, I'll prove it. I'll get married. No. You want to marry someone else without your wife's consent? Halacha l'maisa, you can do that, but you're certainly obligated to pay her ksuva. Next case, Amud Beis, Samechem Amud Beis, 65b. Hu amar ipalt bego eser vihi amar lo iflis. So I said, listen to this. Listen to this. So he claims, over the course of 10 years, you miscarried. He claims his wife miscarried. She claims, I never miscarried. Now what's happening? Take a look at the top Rashi Samachem Beis. Who amrit aflet bego eser kishanu ban lekofa lahotzi who omer hepila besoch eser v'adayin zman lahotzi. But here's an incredible case. In this case, Beis Din is coming along and saying to the husband, listen, you've been married 10 years, there's no kids, you have a mitzvah period of arivia, mitzvah procreation, you have to divorce this woman. And he doesn't want to divorce her. I don't know, either because he doesn't want to pay the ksuva or because he loves her, whatever the case is. He says, I don't have to divorce her. She miscarried. And therefore, again, remember, we'll say, what did we learn? The 10-year clock is reset at the time of miscarriage. See, he says, I'm not obligated to divorce her yet. And she says, I never miscarried. So we'll say, who's believed? So we'll say, according to her, the 10-year window has already elapsed. According to him, it hasn't. We'll say she is believed. Why is she believed? We'll say a woman does not want to have a chazaka as an akara. A woman does not want to be established as someone who is barren. So if she really did miscarry, she would say she miscarried. The fact that she's admitting, sort of quote unquote, admitting that she never miscarried, and therefore again kind of putting herself into the category of an akara, of someone who is infertile, she is believed, because that is to her detriment, not to her benefit. Hepila, v'chazra v'hepila. But so listen to this. What happens if a woman became pregnant, miscarried, became woman, right, 3 times? Pregnant, miscarriage, huchsika l'nefalim. Ultimately, again, halacha l'maisa, she has a chazaka now that she miscarries. Now, I will say, what's the ramification of that? Take a look at Rashi. Huchsika l'nefalim. Rashi says, v'yotzi v'yitin ksuva shema lo zacha li banos imena. So in that case, halacha l'maisa, he has to go ahead and divorce her, give her ksuva, because he's not going to have children ultimately through this woman. Who amar afilo trey v'amra tlas. What happens if he says you only miscarried twice? She says, I miscarried 3 times. Now both say, so remember, according to the husband now, you've only miscarried twice, which means you don't have a chazaka of being a woman who miscarries, and therefore we could still be married to each other and still try to build a family together. She, on the other hand, says, no, I've miscarried 3 times. Therefore, I have a chazaka of a woman who miscarries, and therefore we can no longer be married. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. So who's believed? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. Uvda hava bei midrasha. This once happened in the base medrash. Va'amri hi mehemnia. And we've established she is believed. Why is she believed? Din isa delo afla nafsha benefila mechaska. For a simple reason, I was saying, it's not in her best interest to establish herself as a woman who miscarries. The fact that she did this, so the fact that she says this gives her credibility. So we'll say, and that is halacha l'maisa. So you begin to see a theme in all of this, right? So she's believed in terms of number of times that she's miscarried, right? She's believed to say whether or not she miscarried or didn't miscarry. She's believed to say that the fertility issue is him, that his zera is not yorek echetz. So you begin to see that in dvarim lebeino lebeino. So first of all, in matters of her own body, it's actually it's actually interesting because now, right, the hot topic is, right, a woman's right with the Supreme Court decision that was leaked, right? What is a person's autonomy over their body? So you begin to see that from a halachic perspective, anything to do with the woman's body, she's believed. In other words, I miscarried, I didn't miscarry, I'm believed. Your zeras yorek echetz, not yorek echetz, I am believed. So halacha l'maisa, she is believed in any of those things. She has greater credibility than the husband to say what is happening within her body. Incredible. I will say Mishnah, this is the end of the Peri V'Rivya. I will say so exciting. Ha'ish mitzvah Peri V'Rivya. A man is commanded regarding Peri V'Rivya, meaning the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya is on a man. A woman does not have the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya. Rabbi Yochanan Broka says, Al Shnehem hu Omer Vayivarach Hashem Lakim Vayomer Lahem Peru Ravu. Rabbi Yochanan Broka says, no, the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya is on both a man and a woman. Because what does the pasuk say? The pasuk says Hashem blessed them and He said to them, to Adam and Chava, Peru or Ravu. So the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya ultimately is on both the man and the woman. So he says the Gemara Menachani this. Let's analyze. What's fundamental machlokes? Who has the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya? Tanakama, just the man. Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, man and woman. Says the Gemara Menachani. How do you know that the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya is only on a man? Amar Rabbi Eli Mishum Elazar Reb Shimon Amar Kra Umeluas Haaretz V'Kiv Shuha. The pasuk says, fill the earth, Meluas Haaretz V'Kiv Shuha, and subdue it or conquer it. So the Gemara says, Ish darko lichbosh ve'in ikar darko l'chavish. It is the derech of a man to conquer things, not the derech of a woman to conquer things. I will say they're talking about like physical conquest over here, like war, battle, right? So therefore, again, it's more of the derech of a man to go ahead and engage in battle and conquest, not the derech of a woman. Therefore, because the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya is linked to conquest, therefore, halacha l'maisa, the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya is on a man, not on a woman. Okay, so the Gemara says, Adarabba, just the opposite. V'kiv shuha, Rabbi say kiv shuha is plural. Sounds like it's talking to more than one person. Tarti mashma sounds like it's talking to 2 people, more than one person. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, maybe the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya should be both on men and women. So Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak v'kavsha ksiv. I will say, as much as we read it v'kiv shuha, when you look at the letters, the way it would be vocalized would be v'kavsha, which is singular. Rav Yosef says it comes from here. Me'acha ani kel shakai perei urevei. Is a cheshbon talking to Yaakov Avinu. I am Hashem, your God. Be fruitful and multiply. V'lo ka'amar. Now that's singular. V'lo ka'amar peru urevu. It doesn't say plural. So again, so therefore, it's learned that either from the linkage of Peri V'Rivya to Kivshuha, only those who conquer, so to speak, only those who engage in physical conquest, which is generally men, have the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya. Or second possibility is when Hashem says it to Yaakov Avinu, it said Perei Urevei singular, talking to Yaakov, indicating to us that the mitzvah Peri V'Rivya is on a man. So I will say, once we quoted Rabbi Eloi in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, we quote other rulings, other teachings of his. Rabbi says incredible. Rabbi Eloi, Mishum Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Kashim she mitzvah al adam lomar davar hanishma. The same way that it is a mitzvah to say something that will be heard. Kach mitzvah ala adam shelo lomar davar she'eino nishma. It's also a mitzvah to abstain from saying something that will not be listened to. Now, what's the context here? Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Lomar davar hanishma dichsiv hochiach tochiach. The Bible said there's a mitzvah of tochacha. There's a mitzvah to give rebuke. Right? If you see someone doing something wrong, there is a mitzvah to go ahead and tell the person, stop it, what you're doing is wrong. So Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yaakov, or Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says the same way that there is a mitzvah to go ahead and give hochacha and to give rebuke. And Rabbi Elazar, by the way, rebuke doesn't mean, rebuke sounds like such a strong word, like you're yelling at someone, angry at someone. There's a mitzvah. If you see someone doing something wrong, there's a mitzvah to say, no, I love you, I care about you. We don't do that. That's not how we behave. That's not how we act. The same way that there's a mitzvah to give rebuke when it's going to be listened to, there's also a mitzvah to abstain from saying something when it's not going to be listened to. And I will say this is such an incredible yesod and a mistake that so often we make in life. Sometimes we think that because we feel something, if I feel it, I should say it. It's the right thing to say, so I should say it. No, words are given to us so that we could have an impact. That's why Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the koach of dibur. I have the power of speech so that I can impact the world with my words. I can impact my children with my words, my marriage with my words, my community with my words, my world with my words. And when you have the opportunity to impact your world with your words, use them. But if you can't impact your world with your words, if your words are going to fall on deaf ears, if your words are going to be unimpactful or worse, if your words are going to have a negative result or negative repercussion, then don't use them. Then utilizing them would be a misuse of those very words. We'll say such an incredible yesod. Sometimes we don't realize why we have the koach hadibur. I was given this gift so I can make a difference in this world. Great. If your words make a difference, use them. But if your words don't make a difference, don't use them. That's bizbuz hamilim. That's a waste of words. So same way there's a mitzvah to say something that's going to be heard, there's a mitzvah to not say something, to abstain if it's not going to be listened to. Incredible. Rabbi Abba Amar Chova. Rabbi Abba says, by the way, not only is it a good idea not to say words that are not going to be heard, but it's a mitzvah to withhold your words if they're not going to have a desired impact. Shene'emar, al tochach leitz pen yisanacha hocheach lachacham v'yevacha. So what's a ve'avcha? A beautiful, beautiful pasuk from Mishlei. The pasuk says, do not rebuke a scoffer, a letz, right? Do not rebuke a scoffer because he'll come to hate you, but rather rebuke a chacham and he will love you. What a pasuk. Rabbi Shimon will say another teaching from Rabbi Yelani and Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Shimon, mutter lo la'adam l'shanas davra shalom. Wow. Perhaps one of the most important yisodos in life. Rabbi will say you are permitted to go ahead and change the truth for the sake, we don't call it lying, we call it changing the truth, right? For the sake of preserving shalom. For the sake of preserving shalom. Where do we see this? From Shneimar, Avicha Tziva Kosum Yosef Anasana. We'll say, where do we see this? It's interesting. This is not the first occurrence of it, but it's one of the occurrences. That what happened after Yosef dies, the Shvatim, the brothers say to Yaakov, your father commanded, your father told us before, right? Yaakov told us before he died that we should tell you that when he dies, we should tell you that, don't take revenge on us for what we did to you. And I will say, Yaakov never said that. Whether or not even Yaakov ever knew about what happened to Yosef or how Yosef got down to Mitzrayim is a whole machlokes on Farshim. But one thing is clear. Yaakov never gave instructions to his sons about what to say to Yosef upon his death. Yaakov could have said it himself. But yet the brothers went ahead. The brothers were scared for what Yosef was potentially going to do with them now that Yaakov was dead. So therefore, again, they made up a story. So you see from here that you're permitted to go ahead and change the truth for the sake of preserving shalom. Rabbi Nassan says not only can you, it's a mitzvah. We'll say incredible. It is a mitzvah to change the truth. It is a mitzvah to sometimes, we'll call it change the truth a little bit, alter the facts a little bit, if you're able to preserve a greater shalom. Shene'emar, Vayomer Shmuel, Eich Elech v'shama shal v'argani. Remember again, when Kadosh Baruch Hu commands Shmuel Hanavi to go and coronate one of the sons of Yishai. So Shmuel says, Kadosh Baruch Hu, what am I going to do? I'm going to go coronate one of the sons of Yishai. So Shaul's going to hear about this and he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. So how could I go ahead and do this? So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, just take an animal with you, and if anyone asks, tell them you're going to offer up a carbon. So Kadosh Baruch Hu is telling Shmuel to alter the facts a little bit. In this case, it's in order to save Shmuel's life. But the Gemara understands, even if it's not such a dramatic example of saving one's life, to preserve shalom. Rabbi Shmuel Tana, Gadla Shalom, shalom is great, and therefore we'll say shalom is so incredibly important that what? Sha'af HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shinabo. Even HaKadosh Baruch Hu changes the truth for shalom. The Baal already said that the Baal Shalom changes the truth for shalom. The Gemara says, "The meikar ksiv va'adoni zaken ulevasof ksiv va'ani zakanti." Because what's when Hakadosh Baruch Hu tells Sarah Imenu, right? Or I should say, when the Malachim tell Avram Avinu about the fact that he's going to have a child, Sarah Imenu overhears this and she laughs and she says, I can't have a child. Va'adoni zakanti. My husband is so old. My husband is so old. In other words, she put on Avram Avinu. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu confronts Avram and says, why did Sarah laugh? Why did Sarah laugh? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Sarah laughed and she said, Va'ani zakanti, I am old. So Rabbi said, do you see what happened over here? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ribon Shalom Malach Malchei Avachim, changed the facts in order to preserve someone's Avram Avinu's Shalom Bayis. Because had Hashem told Avram, when Sarah heard about the kid, she laughed and she said, you're old. How would that have made Avram Avinu feel? So instead, what does the Chashon Baruch do? Chashon Baruch Hu says, Sarah laughed and she said, I'm old. Both say, incredible. So from here you see that halacha l'maisa, you are permitted to go ahead and change the facts in certain circumstances. And I both say, how you use this, when you use this, has to be done very carefully with much consideration, because it is easy to become a habitual liar and cloak it under, I'm a shalom guy. But I both say, but you do see from here the ability to sometimes change or shade or shift facts in order to go and preserve shalom. And I both say, we see from here, Gadol HaShalom, how important shalom is in our marriages, in our homes, in our shuls, in our community, in our people. That even MS is a big thing. MS is a really big thing. But even MS is kind of allowed to be altered a little bit for the sake of the preservation of good. So let's just do another line, and then we'll stop for today. Says the Gemara. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says. So let's remember, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka said in the Mishnah that halacha l'maisa, the mitzvah pir v'rivya is on a woman as well. Itmar Rabbi Yochanan ben Levi, chadam halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, v'chadam ein halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. So both say, so one opinion said that halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, that pir v'rivya applies to women, and the other opinion says it doesn't apply to women. So says the Gemara, tistayim Rabbi Yochanan hu da'amar ein halacha. Ultimately, again, it would appear that it was Rabbi Yochanan who said that the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. The Yosef Rabbi Aval v'kamar Mishad Rabbi Yochanan halacha. Because let's listen to this. One time, Rabbi Yochanan was saying that the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, that the mitzvah pir v'rivya is upon women as well. Va'adrinu Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi la'apayu, and Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi turned away. So we'll say they turned away, almost to say we don't believe that. We don't believe that ruling. Vika the Amri, others say Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar. Rabbi Chia bar Abba was the one who said that halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Va'adrinu Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi la'apayu. Amra Papa Bishlam Lamam Amar Rabbi Avo Amra Mishum Kavod Bekesa La Amrule Velo Midi. So it makes sense if they say that it was Rabbi Avo who said. Rabbi Avo was very close to the Caesar, and therefore halacha l'maisa, they did not want to offend him. Elaman da Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amra Lemru Le Lo Amar Rabbi Yochanan Achi. But if it was Rabbi Chia bar Abba who said it, they could have just said no. Rabbi Yochanan did not say this. So we'll say we'll stop over here. We're going to leave this last part of the sugya, the end of the parak, Emirat Hashem, to do together tomorrow. But we'll say just listen where I'm leaving you off. I'm leaving you off here in a machlokes. The machlokes of our Mishnah, to whom does the mitzvah pir v'rivya apply? Does it apply to just men? That's the opinion of the Tanakama. Or does it apply to women as well? That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Resolution of this important machlokes, Emirat Hashem b'shal tol maslachas tomorrow. And we'll say, shkoyach. Another great daf, another great day. Looking forward to seeing everyone in person tomorrow. Have a great day. Shkoyach, everyone.